Welcome to this Preact presentation. The idea of this presentation is to equip you with some of the knowledge and tools that you will need to prepare your company for a new CRM system. The presentation discusses the practical things you'll need to think about with your team so that you're in the best possible position when it becomes time for you to approach a vendor to help with the implementation. At Preact, we've been helping customers to implement CRM projects for nearly 20 years, and so I'd like to think that we're in a good position to be able to deliver advice. My name is Ian Wicks and I work as a project manager here at Preact. I've been involved with CRM projects since the late 1990s. Most of the projects we're implementing these days are Microsoft Dynamics CRM projects. But this video isn't targeted at any particular CRM software or suite. It addresses the topics that are relevant to any organisation that is considering implementing a CRM system, whether you have 10 employees or 10,000 employees. Getting CRM right is tough, and it involves quite a commitment of both time and money. And experience shows us that there is a direct correlation between the amount of time invested in preparing for the project versus the amount of money spent on the project, also versus perceived ROI. For most people, being put in charge of a CRM project internally is going to be a pretty daunting task. Typically, an employee can be expected to be involved in a major project like this only once or twice during their career. So it's actually quite understandable that a sense of panic might start to kick in, and the person charged with leading the project can feel a bit overwhelmed. To that we say, don't panic. All you need to do is put aside some time for planning. Winston Churchill coined the phrase, "He who fails to plan, plans to fail." Even now, as CRM technology gets more and more sophisticated and project management gets more and more mature, it's still reported by various surveys that between 60 and 80% of CRM projects fail to meet their objectives. And it's our belief at Preact that by just sitting down and making a realistic and methodical plan at the outset of any CRM project could easily reduce this figure by half. In this presentation, we're going to show you 11 simple steps to move you towards starting your CRM project. There's nothing complicated about it. Most of it is just common sense. The 11 steps represent 11 opportunities for you and your team to discuss various aspects of CRM, to document them, so that by the time you're ready to approach a vendor or supplier, you'll be in a very strong position to express clearly your goals and expectations. Step 1. The first step is to build your team. You can call it a team, a coalition, or steering group. It doesn't really matter. But this is the internal group of people who will steer your project. The members of this team should include a cross-functional representative of every department who will use or may use the system either initially or ultimately. You should include members from the sales, marketing, customer support, customer service, management, IT, finance, sometimes other departments too. A typical team for a CRM project will have an executive sponsor. This is a board-level person who is ultimately responsible for the success of the CRM project. A lot of CRM projects fail because of insufficient support for the project from a board level. Having this person on board is crucial to the project. The executive sponsor needs to be kept informed at all times of how the project is progressing, so that they're in a position to make informed decisions throughout the life cycle of the project. You're going to need a project manager too. Now, this role is also crucial. This is the one person who acts as the linchpin for all project communication, both internally and externally with your CRM suppliers. The project manager is responsible for collating all the requirements prior to product or vendor selection, for organising meetings, documenting and distributing the findings of these meetings, coordinating between team members, etc., etc. The list goes on forever. So here I guess what you need to choose is someone who's very good at organising things and someone who's a good communicator and possibly someone who's good at delegating too. You're going to need a nominated CRM administrator. Don't necessarily need to identify this person straight away, but CRM administration can be seen as split between the IT side of things and the data side of things. So this role often is taken up by two people. So from an IT perspective, you'd be looking at licensing issues, client installs, tech support, and from the data perspective, you'd be looking at things like defining and communicating data entry protocols, importing leads, global updates to records, creating marketing lists. You're also going to need representatives of the different functional areas that are going to be using the system, your key business users. So preferably this is going to be people that are respected and liked by their peers, that have a good experience of what's needed in each functional area. If you've got different sales teams operating in different ways, you may need a person from each team. The idea is that the person will have the knowledge that's needed from their area, what works, what doesn't currently work. Having people from each business area on the team goes a long way to improving the chances of your user adoption success, particularly if the people chosen are influential and you can get them on board as a super user. Another key thing about the CRM steering group, don't just have it for the duration of your CRM project. This group of people should be meeting at least quarterly to hold a CRM review and to take your CRM strategies forward. Step 2. Define your vision and set out your high-level goals. Once you've got your team together, you can start to look at some high-level goals for the new CRM system. This might be things like helping salespeople to easily manage and close opportunities, giving sales managers a complete view of the pipeline, providing a complete picture of every customer to those that need it within your organization, or running and tracking the effectiveness of marketing campaigns, or to provide better service for your customers. Each of these will represent the key objectives for your CRM system. Everything you do will be in the context of these objectives. It's important to remember that you don't have to do it all at once. After all, you're not doing it all now, right? Each of these steps represents an opportunity to run a workshop on that particular aspect. Now, sometimes this session can start off a little bit woolly, but you can come back to this list throughout your preparation for your CRM project and you'll be able to define it a little bit more clearly as you go along. Another key thing to think about on this step is how you're going to measure whether or when you have met these goals. For example, if I said I wanted to provide better service to my customers, how will I know when we're doing that? So one way to address this might be to use that provide a better service to my customers as a heading, and underneath it list some specific and measurable goals that feed into the overall goal, such as, for example, 90% of service calls to be responded to within a 2-hour SLA, or automate monthly customer review meetings for level 1 customers, for examples. It's important to know that your goals can actually be measured so that you know when you've achieved success. Step 3. Prioritise your goals. So in step 2, we defined a list of high-level goals and measurable objectives for your new CRM project. So in this step, we'll take that list and we'll prioritise it. Sure, we want to do everything, and that's okay, but where possible, let's do these things one at a time. This creates a much more structured and orderly approach and allows you to focus on one area at a time and give it your full attention. In most cases, it starts with implementing the sales processes. There are various reasons for this, including the fact that salespeople are just about the hardest ones to get on board usually. So if we can get these guys on board, we're over halfway there. You tend to find that because marketing people and service and support people are much more logical and practical kind of people, you tend to have much less user adoption issues. When people try to implement everything in one go, we call this the Big Bang approach. And this approach can work on very small CRM projects. But obviously it still makes sense to try and roll out in some kind of logical order. So when deciding on your phasing, think about quick wins that you can build upon. Also think about your resources. If you're trying to go live, for example, with your sales team and your service team, and they've all got new processes as well, and you're trying to do it all on the same day, think about how overwhelming that's going to be. So the result from this step would be to prioritise the goals that you defined in step 2. Step 4. Identify your processes and pinpoint current pain points. The next thing is to draw out your current processes. Now this can seem kind of alien to a lot of companies because they've never formally analysed or documented their processes before. But if you think about it, every organisation runs on processes. So a simple sales process, a lead might come in from the web or it might come in from a phone call. The first question to ask then is, do we treat phone leads any different to web leads? If the answer is yes, then we need to draw the 2 different leads methods in 2 boxes, web leads and phone leads, and then show the paths that each one travels. It might be that after 1 or 2 steps they merge back again as an opportunity. So then you would have both boxes pointing into a single box called Create Opportunity, for example. Also, when drawing out the process maps, think about exceptions and make sure you've accommodated them. For example, phone leads always go to Team A unless the person is interested in our premium range when it goes into Team B. So we have to put a little decision box after the incoming lead that says premium interest with 2 lines leading off yes and no. The yes line leads to Team B makes a call, and the no line leads to Team A making a call. Once you've drawn out these process maps, go through them with all the stakeholders and then determine which bits work well and which bits could be improved or even automated. From these discussions you can draw out a second set of processes which will be your intended process. So you end up with a set of diagrams for the current processes and a set for the to-be processes. There are many benefits to actually drawing out these process maps, aside from any CRM projects. The act of drawing out the process removes any ambiguity over what happens during your sales process, for example, or during a customer service issue. It provides absolute clarity also when you communicate with your chosen vendor or supplier, therefore saving time and consequently saving you money. If you're still not sure how to draw out a process map, there's plenty of good info on the web about how to draw one out. Just make sure you consult all the stakeholders who are involved afterwards to make sure that you've validated it and you know it's correct. Step 5. Think about report outputs. Before we decide which fields to put onto the various forms of our CRM system, we need to have a think about the reporting output. Nowadays, many of the CRM systems available negate the old traditional need for customized reports by providing easily created dashboards, charts and dynamic views, such as the sales pipeline dashboard in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. But it's well worth deciding from the outset what outputs the various departments will need from the system, because that's going to affect what we decide we need to have as an input. And even think about what sort of things the users would like to see on a useful dashboard, for example. Whenever you're designing reports for managers or for departments, a really good tip is to always draw out the report on a piece of paper. This will help later when adding fields, because you'll know then what fields need to be added to the CRM in order to produce the reporting requirements. And these diagrams are also very useful for anyone who has to write these custom reports for your system. Step 6. Fields and data capture. So by now we know what our goals are, and we should now be very familiar with them. And we pretty much know the processes that are to be mapped into CRM. Now it's time to think about the CRM system design and data capture. Don't forget, all the time you spend on this upfront planning, you will be saving your company money by shortening the amount of time your vendor or supplier needs to spend conducting requirements gathering workshops and scoping meetings and the like. Even though you may not have extensive knowledge about your chosen CRM product yet, you can still have a think about the various forms and fields that you'll need to be working on with your new system. For example, you're going to have a record for an organization or a company. You're also going to have records for contacts, leads, opportunities, possibly service cases and quotes too. Take each one of these entities in turn and decide what's the minimum amount of data you need to capture on each one. And there's a difference between want and need, so maybe prioritise as well here. On a sales opportunity, for example, you might need the following: product range, line items, a time frame, so a start date and an end date. You might want to allocate a salesperson. You might want to set a probability and an amount and a sales stage, for example. A word of warning, don't get too carried away, because the more fields and forms and customizations that you create, the more user adoption hurdles you're putting up. But it can also end up being quite costly to maintain and support if you over-egg the pudding too. Albert Einstein summed it up very concisely when he said, "Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler." In other words, decide what's the minimum required to meet your goals and then implement that. Step 7. Identify your data sources. In our experience, by far and away the biggest cause of project delays is to do with our customers consolidating data ready to go into the new CRM system. It's very common for people to underestimate how long this exercise can take. There are various ways in which this can be approached, and this depends upon how much the customer wants to do themselves and how much they want to pay a provider like us to do for them. Probably the most cost-effective way to deal with data imports is to ask your CRM provider to give you a template or templates that you just populate with your data and then that are ready to go straight into CRM. Sometimes that's not always possible, and you may have data sitting in an existing CRM system and in people's Outlook contacts folders or in spreadsheets, so in various different places. Once you've located the data, you need to ask a few questions. How clean is the data? How old or how relevant is the data? How much do we want to import? Do we just want to take all this junk from one old system and put it all into our new CRM system? If we're importing history, for example, how far do we want to go back? 1 year? 2 years? 7 years? Have we got a budget for data cleansing? If not, who's taking on that responsibility? And what are we doing about duplicates? Usually the initial importing of data can be quite challenging, so be prepared to work with your vendor or supplier to create a trial import for validation purposes before the actual live import. Step 8. What about integration? Integrating CRM with other back-office systems is quite common nowadays and can offer a huge return on investment by providing a one-stop shop for the entire customer view. So imagine the scenario: your customer phones up and he asks about his delivery. So you have to transfer him to the shipping department. Then he wants to talk about his invoice, so they have to transfer him to the accounts team, etc., etc. Whereas if you had some kind of integration set up with the order management system, with the accounting system, you'd have been able to look at his record and answer his questions with one phone call. Creating integrations can also provide useful insights to salespeople. So a salesperson looks at a company record and they can see what a person's been buying. They can then deduce what they're likely to buy, increasing their chances of sales success and thereby increasing company profits. And frankly, anything you can do to create value for salespeople is going to work in your favour, making them more inclined to want to use the system. So as well as providing views of data from other systems, the integrations can also be used to push data from CRM elsewhere around the company. For example, the creation of a customer record in the accounting package when a CRM sales opportunity record is won. Or the syncing of your tasks and your appointments from Outlook to CRM, and vice versa. Or you might also be considering integrating with a third-party email marketing solution provider, such as .mailer, for example. So make a list of possible integrations, make a list of what are the benefits on each one, then you can decide if it's worth it. Step 9. Organizational structure, users and security. So, do you have regional divisions within your company, or is it made up of various business units that work fairly independently of each other? If it is, then do you want some or all of the data to be shared amongst these business units? How is it currently set up? Do you have teams maybe that work across the business units? If you work in a smaller organisation, then some of these questions might not be so relevant. But this next part is, think about the various different user groups and what levels of access you want them to have in your CRM system. For example, are you happy for your entire workforce to use the export to Excel function? Or do you want to limit this only to certain users or user groups? Or do you want all the salespeople to have access to all the customer records? Or do they maybe just have access only to those records that are assigned to them? So when you're running this session, think about everything to do with security, users and user groups. Step 10. Assess the risks. Fact: every project has risks. It's often said that CRM projects are made up of 3 components: people, process and technology. And in order to have a successful CRM project, all 3 components need to be a success. The largest cog in this wheel is the people component. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that a CRM project is just a technical project, when in fact the technical component is very often the smallest of the 3 cogs. So for this step, assess the risks. You need to think about or brainstorm all and every single possible risk to your project. All the people risks, the technology risks and the process risks. List them, and then for each risk examine it and work out how likely is it to happen. You might decide you're going to use a scoring system where 1 is the least likely to happen and 5 is very likely. And then to develop this further, you might even add a second scoring system to assess the impact on the project if that risk does happen. So for example, 1 doesn't have a big impact, 5 has a massive impact, and all the way along the scale there. This scoring system will highlight the most dangerous risks for you, and for these you'll need to come up with a workable strategy to deal with the risk if it should happen, or to mitigate it or lessen the chances of it actually happening. But in its simplest form, you could just make a list of all the possible risks and then come up with a strategy for each one. So a few examples might be that the risk might be the system design is too complicated to use, so that equals a low user adoption. So our strategy would be to make sure that we keep the design simple, make sure the users are consulted. We might have another risk where the users don't fill in records properly, so we end up with bad and inconsistent data. So our strategy to deal with that would be to make certain fields mandatory, maybe create a data entry manual for users as well. We might have a risk that says that users are not motivated to use the system, so again, low user adoption. Our strategy, make sure we sell the benefits prior to go live, make sure that we create incentives for people to use the system. I should stress that these are just examples that I've just thought of. You'll need to spend some time brainstorming with your project team what are the possible risks, and then for each one identify a strategy to deal with that risk. Step 11, create a user adoption strategy. Now this step really follows on from step 10, which was assessing the risks, because one of the major risks in any CRM project is the risk of low user adoption. 47% of CRM vendors, that's people like us at Preact, recognize user adoption as the biggest obstacle to project success. And customers recognize that user adoption as the number one cause of CRM project pain. Now there are several theories as to why this is, and here's what I think is the main reason, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the project being mostly about people rather than technology. Because a lot of companies fail to recognize the people side of the project. They fail to engage with people at all the different stages of the project. The key to increase user adoption is to involve as many users as possible throughout the project, from the very early stages, where you can consult people and ask them what would they want from a system if it's going to create efficiencies and benefits to them, right through to consulting them through user testing prior to go live, so that each and every process is tested by the person who knows the most about it. The key is getting the balance right, because you don't want a CRM designed by a committee where it just is over-engineered completely, but you do need to consult users as well. So, simply put, people have a fear of change, and if you involve them from the start, you tend to remove some of that fear. And having the board level support for CRM is also critical for your user adoption strategies. Make sure that the directors are on board and excited about CRM. You don't want your users to think of the CRM system as optional. So carrots are always better than sticks, but sometimes the stick is necessary. For example, your KPIs are now going to be measured from within the CRM system. In other words, if it's not in CRM, it hasn't happened. Other things you can do are to create super users who become the go-to person in each department for anything CRM. And make sure when you're investing in training, give the users more than one just generic training session. Where possible, training should be role specific. Make a documented plan from this session about how you intend to maximize user adoption of your new CRM system, and assign someone the responsibility for user adoption. So there you have it, 11 steps to prepare for a new CRM implementation. I admit it's a fair amount of work, but having said that, if you manage to complete these steps prior to implementing your CRM, you stand a very good chance of being one of those CRM project success stories. It's all about managing the risk. Of course, we'll happily answer your questions and discuss your CRM requirements, so please do contact any of the team here at Preact if you'd like to find out more. Meanwhile, can I take this opportunity to wish you every success with your CRM project.